Hey everyone, Urban Fish Keeper here. I hope you're all doing well. Now, firstly, let me just apologize. I'm hoping that the noise or the sound from my filters is not going to come through too strong, but I've decided to leave it on while I record all the bits and pieces for this project. It makes it a lot easier as opposed to me having to move the rack to get to the power, to switch off the pump and so forth. So hopefully the sound's not an issue. All right, so in some of my previous videos, I have mentioned that I'm looking at doing another project, and this is it here behind me. So what I want to do is just give you an idea of what this project's about, share some of the stuff that I'll be using, then we'll stop, I'll carry on working, we'll come back and recap what I've done, and so we'll continue through the build till the end, and then hopefully it will look good. I have an idea in my head of how it's going to look and what I think it should look like, but like anything, I'm building this based on a concept I have in my head, and it may not get anywhere close to that by the end, but we'll give it a go. Like everything else in this room, we give it a go, we'll see how it goes, we'll try it out, and hopefully we have some success. All right, so what am I actually going to call this? I don't know. My original thoughts is that I'm calling it the alternative fish rack. It's a bookshelf, but it's alternative because we're doing something a little bit different. Just around the rack itself, or the unit that I've got here, this is one that's just come from IKEA. I was down at IKEA with my wife, and they've got a section off to the side where they've got stuff that's been pre-built, has maybe got scratches on it, etc., and they sell that at a reduced price. So this one, let me just pull the tag off. There we go. This is called the Billy bookcase. Hopefully you can see that. All right, it was $119. I got it for $71, and while I was there, I quickly had a quick look online. Each one of these shelves can take 30 kilos. So that made me feel, I think it was 30 kilos. That made me feel a little bit better about using something like this. I am going to do some reinforcements around the outside, and I'll go through that with you. So anyway, got the bookcase. Now, what I've done so far is really, I've just started mounting some of the lights. You probably can't see it there, but here's one of the lights. Now, the lights that I'm going to be using in this is just lights of eBay. They're not pricey, and this is what they look like. And I'm just mounting that. So what I do is I pull out the extenders, I twist the extender around. Bear with me while I get this back in here. Okay, the extender around. That then gives me a little bit of a lip up here, and that then allows me to attach that onto the shelf. Now, what I did find was that what I wanted when it came to the lighting is I wanted the versatility of being able to move the lighting forwards or backwards depending on the kind of fish that I'm keeping in these little aquariums. We'll get to the little aquariums now. So that, because some fish display really better with the light on front of them, some fish better from behind, some fish better from above. So I wanted that flexibility. Now, in order to do that, I needed to come up with something. So what I've done is, this doesn't have to be out of acrylic, but you've seen me build stuff out of acrylic. I enjoy working with acrylic. I've just made these little acrylic brackets. All right. And what they've got is, it's really just a square block of acrylic, 2 holes in it. It's got a grooved out center piece, and that then goes where that attaches. That groove then fits in there, and then that goes up against the shelf. Now, the reason for doing that is, and yeah, you should be able to see on here, the reason for doing that is that I now have the ability to move the light forward, or I have the ability to shift the light much further back, right? So, back, that far back, And if I go forward, right, it's basically a finger thickness from the front. All right, so that's the first thing I've done. So I've already mounted 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm about to do number 5. Okay, so that's it. From a lighting point of view, I've done those. What I'll do is, once I'm finished going through this little section now, I'll get on to mounting the next light. I will then also go around doing some reinforcements on the shelves. And for the reinforcements of the shelves, it's probably not necessary because each one of these can take 30 kilos. But what I am doing is through the ends, into the shelf, I'm putting 2 screws on each side. So a little bit more strength into the shelf. So, you know, if something happens to the shelf holders underneath that hold the shelf, at least I've got the screws in there. And then what I'm doing is around the back as well, on this backboard that's loose, I'm actually screwing that backboard into the rear of the shelf as an additional support. And for those, I'm just using what they call timber button head screws. So hopefully you can see that. Okay, and those are going in around the back, and not a lot, you know. I'll probably, on the back of this, we'll probably go 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 into the shelf from behind to hold the backing board into the shelf. So that combined with 2 additional screws through each side into the shelf will provide the strength that I think we're going to need. Now, the downside to drilling anything from the side is that it takes away from the look and spoils the side a bit. So I need to have a look at how I want to deal with that, because the idea to me is that once this is completed with all the lights and all tanks on it, that it effectively becomes a little bit of a display piece, and you can, you know, it's something that looks really good and you're proud of it, and you know, you don't necessarily have to have it hidden away in your fish room. You could have it anywhere else in your home. Those of you that have seen my video on the better rack and the better rack build, in that particular one I went with a whole lot of containers on a bookshelf, a centralized filter system. The water drains from all those containers into the sump filter, and it was then pumped back to each one of the containers. Now for something like the betters, or where you've maybe made the container slightly bigger, you can have some versatility there and have different types of fish, absolutely. But you're still reasonably confined to temperature, similar temperature fish, similar type, you know, need to like the same kind of water, etc. My thinking around this is that each of these are going to be individually filtered, and that'll be sponge filtered, and therefore I could set up each individual aquarium on here to what I want. So as an example, I can have tank number 1 can have some blue shrimp in it. Tank number 2 can have some hybrid betters in it. Tank number 3 can have something else, and tank you know, number 4 can have some tetras in it, and tank number 5 can have some tiny catfish in it, and so forth. Look, I'm sure there's going to be people, once I've set this up and start putting fish in it, that they're going to go, you know, you just can't keep fish in such small containers, you know, other than Siamese fighters or betters. That's just not right. Now, you know what, I don't buy that. I think if we do make sure our water's right and maintenance is correct, and we've got plants and all the rest of it, and you don't overfeed and so forth, you can keep a variety of fish in small containers quite successfully, and the fish will be happy. So filtration, not centralized. Now the next question comes in is, okay, great, so you want to do all this, what are you going to do about heating? So what I've decided is, and I'll go through the build on the heating as well when I do this, is that I am going to use heating cable running across the shelves. Not all the shelves, because I want to have a cold shelf, so no heating on it whatsoever. And then across the other shelves. What I am also though going to do is I want to put the heating cable on the shelf at such a particular location that if I need to, I can move one of these cubes forward off the heating cable. So I can have, you know, if I decide this is a heated row, but I now want to put stuff in there that don't require heat, I can move them all forward to the edge. They don't get heat. I can still leave the heat running for everything else if I need temperature. So that's my thinking around it. I'm going to practically do that. Hopefully as I build on the project, it will evolve. Now from a heating cable point of view, what I've gone with is I've gone with one that I use for reptiles. It's just an Aqua 1 heating cable. The reason I like the Aqua 1 is that it is, I don't want to call it waterproof, but it's water resistant, so it can take moisture and humidity and all those kind of things. The one that I've got here is a 65 watt cable. I think it's about 7 meters or 7.5 meters long, but it's a 65 watt cable. And then this cable will then be controlled by a Reptile 1 Easy Stat. Okay, so the heating cable will run on the shelves, and I'm only going to run one line of heating cable because heat is not, I don't struggle for warmth in this room, and with summer coming up, cooling is more of an issue for me than what heating is. I'm only going to run one strip. You could, of course, if you bought a longer heating cable or use multiple ones, or you could go with shorter ones and have a heating cable on each shelf if you wanted to. Just make sure you then manage those individually and control the temperature on those correctly. I'm only going one, and what I'm doing is I'm going to be running heating cable on the top, drill through the shelf, comes down the inside, runs across the next shelf, drill, goes down, etc., and so it'll run down. From the first one, so we'll do shelf 1, 2, 3, and probably 4. 5 will have nothing. Now, to put the heating cable in on these shelves, there's a couple of ways we could have done this. Well, 2 ways really. One is you can take these shelves and you can actually router a groove all the way along the shelf that is about 6 by 6 mil, because that's what this cable will fit in, and make it so that it's flush and level with the top of the wood. Now, I was originally going to do this with these shelves, is just router them. 2 things that I thought about in that case was, one is it may weaken the shelf, because these are IKEA shelves, these are not solid pine or made from hardwood or anything else, so it may create a bit of a weak line in the shelf, you know. I don't think it would be an issue, but I thought about that. The other thing is that most people that want to maybe do something like this with a bookshelf don't necessarily have access to a handheld router, and don't necessarily have somebody that can do that for them. So how do I make that a little bit more simplistic, that anybody can do it? So what I'm going to be doing, and this is just a piece of offcut I've got up here, but I want to show you anyway. So I'm going to be using 6mm MDF, and just ignore the cutouts, it's just a piece out of the garage. So what I'm going to be doing on here is I'm using 6mm MDF. The 6mm MDF effectively will go onto the shelf. It will be the length of the shelf. It will be cut down the middle, and I will have 2 pieces of 6mm MDF. The cable, because we know the cable's thickness is about 6mm, the cable itself will then go in between, like that. The cable itself will go in between the 2 pieces of MDF, because we've cut this in half. We've made it just a little bit narrower than the shelf. We've put it in there. We've got a groove, so there's a gap in between here. That cable then runs in that gap. So when we put the aquariums in here and on here, they're not raised at all, it's level. So that's what I'll be doing from a, we just pop it up there. That's what I'm going to be doing to provide the heat using the heating cable. The kind of things you're going to need to work on this project, you know, really, you need lots of little screws, you need a square, you know, you're going to need lots of drill bits for drilling various holes. So there's lots of little pieces, screws, drill bits, you know, you need something to do the work with. Pencil to do your markings on the outside, make sure you get the lines right. The other thing I did get is I got a couple of little sticky dots. Now, you don't need sticky dots, you can just use double-sided tape or something. And that's just really when I put the MDF in, I just want to make sure it doesn't move initially when I'm working. So a couple of sticky dots underneath it, put the MDF in, run the cable behind it, put the other piece in, and then hopefully, you know, it'll keep it in place. Then put the aquariums on and then we're all good. So the other things you'll need is some way, because I'm going to run this all on air. That's my other challenge. I'm not too sure whether I'm going to have enough air, because I'm using one Aqua One pond, 8,000 I think it was. And that's providing the air for everything in this room at the moment. Is it going to be enough to push to another, effectively, what are we going to do here, for maybe 20 aquariums, each one with its own individual sponge filter? I'm not too sure. We'll have to see. I'll have to see how that goes once I've got it set up. The other thing that I've done is I've just bought these regulators, air regulators. I think they're meant to be stainless, but probably not. And these are going to be mounted as well. We'll mount this at the back somewhere, figure out a way of doing that. You know, in the case of this, it may be as simple as drilling a hole through, 2 holes through, running through a cable tie, and then cable tying this really tight up against the top. So the thinking around the regulators is I'll have one underneath each shelf, and then we'll run an airline tube into the one side. Airline tube goes out the other side, goes down, around, and comes back to the regulator. So that's the one way I may do it. I may have a split before that, and then run individual airline tubes from another splitter outside of this to each one of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Don't know yet. As I go along, I'll modify and build and change and do those kind of things. When it comes to the filtration, I've decided for this one I'm just going to go with tiny air filters, and they are tiny. But I've been testing them and using them in some of these squares now for probably 2.5, 3 months, and they seem to be okay. So they're really tiny. Maybe I'll go up another size, I don't know. I hope not, because I've bought 20 of these, so let's hope I don't need to go up another size. The concern about going up another size was that I was worried about the amount of space that it'll take up in these little cubes. And now the cubes themselves. So these are the Aqua One cubes, glass. They're really solid. And I'll chat about these more once we get them on the shelf. There's probably one thing I don't like about them is the cover that comes with them. The little glass cover, it doesn't really cover neatly, but I've got an alternative for that. The other thing is they take about 3.5 liters. So 3.5 liters of water, not quite a gallon, almost a gallon of water in here. So the question is going to be, you know, what can we do with this? Yeah, sure, I can keep betters in here, no problem. Could I keep a small group of, you know, maybe some cardinal tetras in there? Could I keep a small, when I say small group, you know, 4, 6. Could I keep some shrimps in this? I think I could. The shrimp keepers will probably say, oh, you're going to struggle to keep your water parameters, and your water parameters are going to fluctuate too much, and you're going to lose your shrimps. I'm willing to give it a go and see what we can do. You know, could I keep 1 or 2, you know, really pretty dwarf gouramis in here? Maybe. Could I keep some of the smaller dwarf catfish, that kind of thing in here? I think so. And to me, it's what I'm trying to see at the end of this is how good will this look with all the lights on, a little bit of substrate at the bottom, you know, a little piece of wood in there, maybe 1 or 2 plants or some floating plants in there at least. And you look at this and there's, you know, a little dwarf gourami, and there's little dwarf catfish, and there's a really stunning better. And what else? It's some cardinals or some neon tetras, a few of those, and could I put a couple of harlequin tetras and some danios? And you look at this, and there's a selection of 20 little aquariums with 20 little ecosystems of different fish, and it's taken up the size of a bookshelf. I mean, what is this bookshelf? It's it's 2 meters high. It's 28 from front to back, and it's 80 centimeters this way. And if that's the space I have to give up to effectively have possibly 20 little aquariums here with 20 different types of fish in it, I think it'll look absolutely awesome. Now, will it work? Other than betters, I've already pushed my luck and probably picked up a little bit of criticism for breeding stuff like dwarf cichlids in 20-liter aquariums, breeding discus in effectively 60-liter aquariums, much smaller than what you should do, etc. But you know what? I still have all my dwarf aquariums, my dwarfs, my apistogrammas. Those that I've sold have been sold, but the ones that I'm keeping are still there swimming alive and breeding. The Hongsloy's on another batch of youngsters. Sure, I have to move the male out once the babies are there. But, has that affected my fish? Has their health gone down? No, it hasn't. My discus keeps spawning. Do I have babies of those? Do I have some of their fry that I'm busy artificially rearing? Absolutely. Would they be better parents if they were maybe in a better aquarium? Maybe. But you know what? I'm not buying some of those views that you have to have X amount of water volume and you have to have a tank this big in order to do something. Again, we don't have the space, and we need to try different things and see how it works. Sure, we have to make sure that the health of the fish is done correctly. Water parameters, all those kind of things. But to tell the hobbyist, no, you can't, and you have to buy a 2-foot aquarium or 3 or 4 or 5-foot aquarium if you want to do X or if you want to keep the following. I don't buy that. I think we can have a lot of joy keeping fish in smaller aquariums if we just look after them correctly. Anyway, I go on a bit, which I shouldn't, and I'm trying not to do, but that's one of those subjects where I get a little bit passionate about. All right, guys, so I'll stop it right there. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to finish the lights on this unit, and then I'm going to go around and do the reinforcements, so the screws around and the backing board onto the back. Then I'll jump on, I'll just show you that quickly, and then I'll move on to that and probably start looking at how I'm going to attach the regulators for the air, how we're going to get that on there. And then we will go on to cutting some 6mm board and putting in and drilling holes through the sides for two things. One is holes through the sides for the lights, for the power supply, and also holes for airline tubing and what else drilling we need to do. Yep, so that's it. Airline tubing, power supplies, the heating cable we need to drill holes for, and the thermostat as well. Okay, I will see you guys soon once I've completed the next phase. Okay, so a bit of an update of what we've done and where we're at. What I've done now is I have put in the MDF pieces, run the heating cable, all the lights are fitted. The bottom shelf down here is the one that's not going to have any heating, so it's got no MDF on it. I have put in the air regulators at the back, and I've secured all the shelves. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the camera, take the camera off the stand, so that I can bring it closer and I can show you exactly what I've done. I've drilled all the holes through the side for the probe, for the controller, for the heating. I've run all the heating cable and tacked that up along the sides. All holes have been drilled, including the holes coming through for the air. What I decided to do on the air supply is, originally I said I may run in one side, out the other side of the regulator, What I've decided to do is I'm actually going to run a splitter before this, and each one of those will get its own air supply from the splitter. Again, still running off the one air unit. All right, so let me grab the camera. I'll talk you through, show you what's happening on these shelves, as well as the reinforcements that I've done and how I've connected the air regulators. I've just used cable ties. I haven't cut them off at the back so you can actually see what it looks like before I neaten it up and trim it up. Let's do that. Okay, so let's just go through what I've done on the back of the unit from a reinforcement point of view. As you can see, I've put in these screws that line up with the shelf on the other side, and this just holds this back panel into the shelf and gives a little bit of extra rigidity to it, and just to me it helps to make sure that it's secured. This cable tie that you see sticking out here, that's the cable tie that's actually holding the air regulator, and all I've done there is I've drilled 2 holes and I've pulled the cable tie through, put the regulator on the other side, and then tightened up. Obviously all of this will be cleaned off. On the side, what I've done is I've put 2 screws in, and that goes into the shelf from the side, and I've done this on both ends. It's just to secure that shelf, make sure. As I said before, the shelf can take 30 kilos, so probably don't need it, but it's just an extra bit of safety. All right, let's have a look at the shelf itself. First of all, the regulator. As you can see, the air regulator is underneath there, and it's just been secured with a cable tie. Now, because it doesn't have to take any weight, or nothing's going to be pulling on it, it's fine for it just to be secured like that, and it's actually quite tight. So that's how I've secured the regulators under each one. As you can see, on each shelf has that. All right, and again, just to show for the lights, the light has the option of moving backwards and forwards, as I discussed before, so we can decide how we want to use it. Okay, now on the shelves itself, so before I get to the shelf, let me just go to the outside, and this section, this here is where the heating cable is coming through. Right, so the heating cable runs through from the outside, pull it all the way through, okay, and it comes through that hole, right? So there's the heating cable. Sorry, I'm just trying to get camera in one hand. So runs through. Then at the end, I've got a hole drilled, and it then goes through the shelf. So we go underneath. You'll see there it comes through the shelf. And what I've done is I've used these little tacks, 6mm little wire tacks, and I've tacked it's a little, it's not a, I don't know if you can call it a tack, it's a wire holder, 6mm, and it holds the cable. That then goes all the way down again. Right, at the bottom there's another one just to hold it against the side. It then runs all the way along, and same process, get that out of the way, hole drilled through, and it goes down. And so I run through each shelf. Now what I've done is, as you can see here, I've got the 6mm MDF, measured it off. That's the first size. Then another strip of MDF behind it, and that basically holds the cable in place. Now you probably don't need that. Well, I would say you do need the wood, but you probably don't need I've used little sticky dots underneath, which I spoke about earlier, and that just holds the MDF in place. Now from an aquarium point of view, and I've spoken about this, and let me try and do this without getting too much reflection. The idea here is, if I move the aquarium to the front of the shelf, as you can see, it's off the heating cable at the back. So if I want this little aquarium to be not heated, for whatever reason, whatever I'm keeping in it, then I move it to the front. From a heating point of view, it fits flush over the cable, as you can see. Right, the cable is just up against the glass, and I can now move that to where I think I want the heating. So in my case, I'm probably going to run it at that position. So the cable runs along the back. Now, if you live in a colder area and you want to use the same concept, you probably need to run 2 rows of this. Same method, but you probably just need to coil it. Sorry, my hand in the way. You probably just need to coil it one more time around the back. And that just means that for the heat, you may want to make this a little bit narrower, this section narrower, and you may just want to run another heat cable further back or further forward. But for me, the design was, one is if I need no heat, they come right to the front like that. They get no heat. If they need heat, they go across the heating cable like that, and there we're done. The other thing is this is MDF, 6mm MDF, as I've said before, and I'm not too sure yet. I may cover this MDF in some vinyl just to give it a similar look to the actual shelf, or I may leave it like this. Just remember, if you're using MDF, MDF loves water, so if you get a lot of water on this, it's going to expand. You can paint this as well. I haven't decided on exactly what I'm going to do there yet. Anyway, so that is how the heating runs. Quite straightforward. Just make sure you use the little tacks to tack it in place, as I've done there. You can see that one clearly. Right, and it just runs down in the groove. Right, tacked, comes through and runs along the groove. Right, and on this side, this is where the heating cable goes in. So I've pulled it right through to the connector, and then coming down this hole here, all these biggish holes are for the power supply to the lights. But this hole has also got the probe that goes through that will regulate the heating cable and the temperature. And then mounted up here, I've got the controller unit to run the heating cable. Right, so that's where we're at. Just to go back. Right, so we got the tank, we got the heating cable, we got the shelving in, we've got it all secured, we got all the lights in. Excuse me. We've got the regulators for the air. So let me just stop it there, and then I'll just give you a quick update on where we go to from here. Okay, so that's a bit of a rundown on how it's all put together. Like I said, the things that I need to still think about is whether I'm covering this in vinyl, whether I'm going to leave it like this. Not too sure exactly what I'm going to do, but we'll see. So next, I will now move this bookshelf into place. It will go where the better rack used to stand, and then it's a question of starting to put the little tanks in place. Starting to connect up the filters, the little sponge filters, provide the air supply, connect up all the power adapters for the lights, get those all connected up, and then probably start putting in some substrate at the bottom, start filling them, that kind of thing. So that's probably where we're at the moment. I'm going to do this in 2 parts, so and it may even go 3 parts. So this is part 1, how we've got to this point. We'll leave it at that, and then I will continue building on it, and I'll give you an update in part 2 where we are. All right, so enjoy, give it a try, guys. You know, any bookshelf you've got, just grab a bookshelf and do something. The one thing I will say though is you don't have to use these Aqua One glass tanks. You know, they're nice, and I think they will look good on you, but they're not cheap. You know, I think I paid, because I bought this a while back, I think I paid around about $25 per tank, and that's really expensive considering that it's, you know, 3.5 liters. Sure, it's, you know, it's built decently, it's not thin glass, but $25, no, it's definitely not worth it, but it's what I wanted on this particular shelf. And when you're buying 20 of these, it becomes really expensive. So, and I think I only got them at $25 because I bought 20. I think the normal price is like $29 or something ridiculous. So really expensive. I would say if you could find an alternative clear plastic would work well. If you could find maybe a tank builder that can do it for you, at probably a fraction of the price. But that's the expensive part of this whole project. Is going to be is these little glass Aqua One aquariums. The rest of the stuff, is relatively cheap for what you're getting. The heating, the MDF. So I didn't have MDF in the garage that was long enough, so I just used 2 pieces to make up the full width. But MDF is cheap, so it can be a cheap project, but if you do it the way I'm doing, it's probably going to add up to be a good couple of dollars at the end of the day. Anyway, guys, that's it from me. Have a fantastic weekend. Have a good week, and then I will continue working on this for part 2. Stay safe, look after yourselves. Urban Fish Keeper out.